A big welcome to everybody today to the Buddhist Society's celebration of Vesak. Vesak is Buddha Day. It's the most important day in our annual calendar. And this is the day when we celebrate not just the life of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, who set out on a quest as a young man to end his own personal unhappiness and found a way to ease not only his own unhappiness, but the unhappiness of everyone else too. And there he found, in that moment of enlightenment, the full yearning of the heart was suddenly fulfilled. And all the stresses and strains of his longings disappeared. But it's not just that moment of enlightenment, it's a whole life that we celebrate. That's the birth, the enlightenment, and the teaching and the death of the Buddha. And that is really a kind of format for the human life. So the Buddha laid out a way and a format, a way to live, a way to become fulfilled. So it was really an extraordinary moment in civilization, in the history of civilization, that this awareness broke into and became part of human culture. And so every year we celebrate it with very good reason too. And we hope that this, this knowledge, this understanding, this physical awareness can be transmitted and to other people, this union of wisdom and compassion that can, if it's really practiced, will solve all human problems, and particularly our own, which is most important. But I'm going to introduce now some of our speakers for today. And we've got, starting off with Roy. Roy Sutherwood is a former director of Jamyang Buddhist Center, London, and a recognized foundation level teacher for the Foundation of the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. And Roy is a senior student of Geshe Tashi Tsering, who is currently the Abbot of Sera Monastic University in Karnataka, India, and he studied under Masters of Buddhist Philosophy and Meditation for many years. He also teaches on the Society's Introduction to Buddhism course and on a Mahayana Buddhist topics at the Society's annual summer school. But I should say that Roy is our senior Tibetan Buddhist teacher here. He occupies a very important place for us at the Society. And those of you who are interested in Tibetan Buddhism, you don't have to become Tibetan Buddhists or anything, but you ought to learn something about it. Please join his class. And today he's going to be talking about liberation and enlightenment. And after Roy has finished, you're going to finish at noon. At 12:30, we have with us Dr. Amal Gunasena, a senior teaching fellow at SOAS. And I will introduce him separately. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have a lovely puja ceremony with Venerable Sila Wimala from the Chisik Vihara. We've had a long connection with since 1926, and every year we celebrate together this special day. So handing over to you, Roy, and looking very much forward to your talk.
Thank you very much indeed, Desmond, and welcome everybody to the Society's Buddha Day. And as it is Buddha Day, I thought it might be rather nice to first of all begin with a settling down, an arrival, a meditation, if you wish. And then from that place to recite the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, whose birth, life, teachings, enlightenment, and parinirvana we're celebrating here today. So if we just bring our attention from wherever we find it now to the experience of the five senses, to the gates of the senses, just bringing the attention to what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell, any residual tastes, and the totality of felt, somatic, bodily sensations, here and now in this posture. Loose, relaxed, but alert. not tightening up. Just looking through any thoughts or feelings we may be having and just paying attention to the simple, fresh immediacy of the experience of the perceptions of the five senses. And just resting there for a while. Gently returning the attention to the seen, the heard, the smelt, tasted, and the felt. If it's distracted by any other internal or external stimuli. And just resting there, mind and body together in union, and allow them to settle into the natural state, anchoring the presence in the felt somatic sensations of the body and the other four senses. And see if you can gently broaden the scope of your attention to include mental consciousness, like a sixth sense, just becoming aware of whatever you find there, looking to suppress anything, block anything, change anything, modify anything, not identifying with it, not indulging or chasing after it, just becoming aware of what's there in mental consciousness, maybe big background emotions, positive, negative, or neutral. Maybe commentary, conversations with oneself, strings of dialogue, more subliminal, harder to ascertain undercurrent thought. Involuntary processing from the past, in the present, or going into the future. Something unresolved from earlier in the day, a dream, or earlier in the week. Hopes, fears, expectations in the present. Maybe processing into the future. What's next? What comes after? Things we're looking forward to, things we want to avoid, things on the to-do list, deadlines, whatever it is. Just be aware of what you find. Mental images, memories, daydreams, reveries. Just embrace whatever you find in the sphere of mental consciousness. Then simplify your attention. Just choose, without blocking anything else out or changing anything, just choose to pay particular attention to the felt somatic sensations of the body, treating all your thoughts, emotions, and contents of mental consciousness as transparent. Just rest, present, in the simple, fresh immediacy of the felt sensations of the body here and now in this posture. Then see if you can pick up the rhythm of the sensations of the breath, the body. like a tidal ebb and flow within the totality of the ocean of bodily sensations. Just rest the attention there, anchored on the breath, using the sensations of the incoming breath to brighten your awareness of those sensations, using the outgoing breath like a sigh to breathe out, let go of anything you may be holding on to, anything you may be tightening up around. Just let go completely on the out breath. Relax more profoundly into the posture and the practice. Just for a few moments, stay riding on the sensations of the breath in the body, allowing both mind and body to settle into the natural state. When you feel you've got some tensional balance and stability and a little serenity, just let go of the breath as an anchor for your attention, but leave everything else the same. Just rest, relaxed, alert, single-pointed, completely unsupported, choiceless awareness, present to whatever arises, abides for a while, transforms, changes, or disappears back into the space of awareness, in our experience of the five senses of mental consciousness. And from that place, let's sort of begin by reciting the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. It's a traditional praise that kind of offers praise to the Buddha, most appropriate for this day, but it takes in the events of his life, teaching, enlightenment, and so on. So I'll share the screen so that you can see the text of what I'm going to recite. We'll recite in English, and just so you can either just sit reflectively and listen, or join in, or you are muted so that only one voice is heard and not a cacophony. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being. Perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shaka clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation. The holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts. To you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies, as many as all realms atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And then if we can just join together in the recitation of the refuge lines, I'll do the first 2 in Tibetan and then the last one in English. Sangye chodang soki chonam la changtu badu dakni kyapsu shi dage chunyen gipe sonam gi rola penchir sangye rupa jo. Sangye chodang soki chonam la changtu badu dakni kyapsu shi dage chunyen gipe sonam gi rola penchir sangye rupa jo. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. In that spirit, let's enter into our celebration of Buddha Day here at the Buddhist Society. So wonderful to see you all. And I said I was going to speak today on the subject of liberation and enlightenment. In the taking of refuge there, we often speak of taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It's one of the ways in which we kind of self-identify as followers of the path of the Buddha, try to deepen our understanding of the Four Noble Truths and follow the Noble Eightfold Path to bring about the cessation of suffering and gain full enlightenment. So there's a kind of a distinction there between liberation from samsara, going back to the first noble truth of suffering, which is very kind of coarse, gross suffering, the physical sufferings of illness, harm, such as we might encounter in war, or if we are attacked or overcome by some physical illness, and gross mental suffering, which is kind of the suffering of suffering. And then there's the suffering of change, the suffering of impermanence, where we think that something is going to bring us happiness and help us avoid pain. But of course, very often the things we latch onto and become attached to as something which is going to bring us that happiness very often turns out not to be what we were looking for. One begins to realize that nothing lasts, that everything changes, and that things we think are good for us now may not be good for us later, or something that we think will bring us pleasure in the moment may ultimately bring us pain. So this is like the suffering of change, another level of suffering from the suffering of suffering, the most gross level of suffering. And then there's a third level of suffering, which is pervasive suffering. This is quite deep, quite profound, and a level of suffering which is really most important from the point of view of the teaching of the Buddha. It's the one, when the Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths, he was not only teaching us the Four Noble Truths, but also saying what we should do with each of them. With the first Noble Truth, his injunction was that we should understand it. And this, of course, means not just understanding it intellectually, but really having a deep existential and experiential understanding of how our lives are marked or marked out by suffering, and that understanding should be so powerful and so strong, it should inspire us and motivate us to see if it's possible to look for the origin of that suffering and bring about its cessation. Well, the cessation of that suffering would indeed be nirvana. So in looking for the origin of suffering, we begin to try to understand why it is this way. And the origin of suffering in the teaching of the Buddha is said to be rooted in ignorance. And that ignorance in Sanskrit is avidya. And I think, as many of you already know, and I've often tried to explain, is a very different idea to the one we have in the English concept of ignorance. It can include it, but it's quite different. Like, it's nothing to do with being unlearned or ignorant in the sense of being coarse or gross or ill-mannered. It's a very particular type of ignorance, and this ignorance is an ignorance which is based upon actively assenting to, thinking that things exist in the way they appear rather than in the way they actually are. And in assenting to the appearance of things, phenomena, and everything, ourselves and everything in our lives, as existing in the way they appear, we mistakenly assent to things having a solidity, a permanence, a kind of intrinsic selfhood or essence that they don't really have. And as a result of that, we make choices, develop attachments and aversions, which have consequences for us karmically, and nothing more magical there than saying karma means action, and actions have consequences. And if those actions are based on a misperception of reality, taking appearances for reality, then the consequence is usually one of suffering. So that fundamental ignorance, which is the cessation of suffering, if one could turn that around, if one could actually come to the realization that we and all phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear, they are not so concrete, so permanent, and possessed of an essential self in the way that we think they are, this would liberate us from samsara, cyclic existence, because acting upon that ignorance, we are kind of driven then by the consequences of our own actions to live out our lives, and in the teaching of the Buddha, live out whole cycles of lives. And wherever we go, for better or for worse, for good or for ill, in the image of the wheel of life, whether it is in higher rebirths of the gods, devas, or human realm, or whether in the lower realms of animal hell and hungry ghost realms, we are ever cycling in samsara or cyclic existence. So liberation is about liberation from that cycle, to bring about cessation of suffering through liberation from cyclic existence. So how does that differ from enlightenment? Again, if we look back to the life and teachings of the Buddha, the subsequent development of Buddhism, one begins to see that there is this distinction. And if you look at it from the point of view of, say, in the Pali canon, the ideal of the Arahat, and then look into the Sanskrit, the Prajnaparamita literature, and the Mahayana, you have the path of the Bodhisattva. And the relationship between liberation from cyclic existence and full enlightenment could be expressed as the difference between realizing the state of an arahat, but then realizing full enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, the realization of our Buddha nature, our full potential, is a step further on. So we have liberation from cyclic existence, and then the possibility of becoming a fully enlightened Buddha, realizing our full potential as sentient beings, because this Buddha nature, as the Buddha showed from his own life and teaching, is something we all have in common. So what then leads on to, from, if you like, individual liberation from samsara and cyclic existence to the possibility of realizing our full potential as fully enlightened Buddhas? The key here is, in Sanskrit, the word is bodhicitta. Bodhi, meaning awakened, chitta, mind. So the awakened mind. So what is the awakened mind that we need to generate or give expression to in order to have the possibility of realizing full enlightenment? And if we look here, then you begin to look, again, taking the example from the Buddha's life, of his extraordinary and great compassion. Having realized enlightenment, he then, although initially unwilling, was persuaded to teach, to show other people the way not only to gain liberation from cyclic existence and bring about the cessation of suffering, but to realize full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So if you like, the gateway to the path from liberation from cyclic existence to full enlightenment is bodhicitta, because one develops a deep yearning or a deep motivation which says, I'm a sentient being. I recognize and understand the suffering that I have, and all those around me, all other sentient beings, they want happiness and they don't want pain. They're sentient beings just like me. So if I wish to be free of suffering, to bring about a cessation of suffering, how could I possibly just do that for myself alone? There's a deep motivation, a deep yearning, which creates an inspiration and a motivation to say, yes, I understand the nature of suffering, and I want to gain liberation from cyclic existence and bring about a cessation of suffering. But I want to do that not just for myself alone, but to do that for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in doing that, one takes on the responsibility, realizing that as we are, our capacity or abilities, with our potential kind of unrealized, our full potential unrealized, our ability to help other beings out of suffering is very limited. So how is it possible to take responsibility for bringing about a cessation of suffering for the benefit of all sentient beings? It's only possible by the realization of one's full potential as a Buddha in order to help all sentient beings out of suffering. So in this sense, bodhicitta, the awakened mind, this motivation to want to not only liberate from cyclic existence, but to realize full enlightenment, not just for oneself alone, but for the benefit of all sentient life, in the way that the Buddha himself did, is what generates and brings the realization of in terms of full enlightenment. So bodhicitta is often said to be the beginning, the middle, and the end of the path in this way, because although it's possible to realize liberation from cyclic existence by understanding suffering and eliminating or cutting at the root the ignorance which generates it, full enlightenment is only possible if you generate the realization of your full potential, is only possible if you develop this deep wish to bring about the cessation of suffering for all sentient beings. So there's the distinction between liberation and enlightenment in a very simple way. There's a lot more we could have to say about that. And I thought we might just do a very short meditation on one of the methods that's used to develop bodhicitta. And it's known in the tradition as the meditation on the 7 points of cause and effect. And it's an interesting, because there are many techniques for the generation of bodhicitta. And this one's interesting because it's a more emotional and intuitive response to the generation of bodhicitta, the awakening mind, and that motivation than it is an intellectual one. So it's aimed more at understanding the notion that all sentient beings are like us. And in that sense, they should be very dear to us, and we should seek to develop bodhicitta from there. So you need to begin on the basis of equanimity, of recognizing all beings as being sentient beings, just like us. No matter how apparently different, no matter how apparently other, realizing that we are all equal in wanting pleasure and wanting to avoid pain. And on that basis of equanimity, then thinking out our way into the generation of not just a wish for individual liberation, but a deep wish for universal compassion and connection with all sentient beings. So if we come back to our sensations of the body and the breath, just resting there for a moment. And start to consider how all sentient beings have this possibility. We all have Buddha nature. We all want pleasure and we don't want pain. And then on the basis of equanimity, thinking, just imagining, just considering that if in the cycle of existence, our experience, our lives have been beginningless and endless, then for the purpose of generating this motivation, is it possible to recognizing all beings as having at some time been our mothers? Is it possible we can develop the conviction to be open to the idea that we have an infinite number of lives in cyclic existence without beginning or end? That we could consider how at some point all beings could have been our mothers. We need to focus on hosting, giving birth, and the basic sustaining and nurturing aspects of motherhood. Try and bring to mind the instinctive feelings we have for our mothers, and embracing that all beings could have been our mothers, and see if it's from there possible to transfer that love and affection towards all beings, irrespective of our adult relationships to our mothers, good, bad, or neutral. If we go back to that very fundamental and deeper, almost instinctive level when we think, our mothers, animal or human, look after, nurture, and foster their offspring. And then maybe from there, can we recall the kindness of others in whatever relationship we feel to others? There are many aspects of our interdependence and relationship with others, but for the purpose of this meditation, focus and recall upon the kindness of others. Think of the amount of the milk of kindness that's been generated. We can expand this to recognition of our dependence on the kindness of others in general, in many, many different ways. Parents who brought us into existence, looked after us, our teachers. Is there any way that any of us could have arrived where we've arrived now that is not in some way dependence on the kindness, industry, cooperation and community of others in many, many different ways? We can just each individually reflect for a moment on that, not in an abstract way, but maybe in ways that are directly relevant to our own life. Then as we begin to generate that feeling of our interdependence and dependence upon the kindness and goodwill of others, is it possible to generate a wish to repay that kindness? Recognize again that there's no difference between ourselves and others. We're all sentient beings, wanting happiness and averse to pain and suffering. You're thinking, I am but one. Others are countless. I have a precious human life, and my suffering is small in comparison to the vast suffering of all other sentient beings. What could I do to ease their burden? Just reflect on that. What possibility is there for me to repay the kindness of others? What best way to do that? Maybe we could do that in a very simple way by the cultivation of affectionate love. The wish that someone be well and happy. Nothing more. It's cultivating on the basis of the previous felt closeness, a wish that all beings could have happiness and the causes of happiness. How good it would be if they had that. May they have that. I will cause them to have that. If we can generate that wish, that all sentient beings be well and happy, knowing how good that would be, wishing that they may have that wellness, happiness, and to think, I will take responsibility to cause them to have that. Then maybe to extend a little further, contemplate the cultivation of compassion, the cultivation of the wish that not only that they have happiness and the causes of happiness, but have a deep wish that all sentient beings should be free from suffering. Think about a world without suffering. Wish that it may be so. And then see if you can make a resolve in whatever way you can to take personal responsibility to make it so. how good it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How can I myself cause them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering? And make it my personal responsibility to do so, to make it so. How can we develop a special intention? Be determined to take responsibility for others and help in some way, to do something about it, and to recognize that full enlightenment is the only way. Because wherever I am now, my capacities to help others in this way, to bring them to ultimate happiness, I can only do if I realize my own full potential and be motivated to realize that, not just for myself alone, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. In this way, cultivate the aspiration to attain, to realize full enlightenment. Because although we might possess the vast open mind that wishes to bring about the complete cessation of suffering for all sentient beings, we still need to develop the potential and the skills to accomplish this in full measure. We need the attributes of a fully enlightened Buddha to be able to engage in a Buddha's enlightened activities. So when we self-identify as Buddhists and look to make that focus, taking refuge or safe direction from the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, kind of safe direction for our lives, study and practice. This is the motivation we require to make that possible. To look not just for liberation from cyclic existence for ourselves alone, but to see if it's possible to realize our full potential, to make that possible for all sentient beings. And then just let go of the discursive, more analytical contemplation. Let it go altogether. And just rest single-pointed on whatever experience you have. Still in body, speech and mind, with the senses vividly alive. Maybe we could dedicate whatever benefit or merit that we've gained from coming together on Buddha Day, celebrating and honouring the life of the Buddha, taking refuge and safe direction in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, and turn it over, give it up, to dedicate it for the benefit of all sentient beings, wishing that the awakened mind should arise in all those mind streams where it's not yet arisen, and that where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase more and more. Jang Chub Sem Chorin Boshe Ma Kyu Panam Kyu Gujing Kyu Wanyam Pa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Elwajo. May the precious Bodhi mind, the precious jewel bodhicitta, arise in all those mind streams where it has not yet arisen. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase further and further, bringing all sentient beings through liberation to full enlightenment. Thank you very much indeed. There's a few moments to reflect and take any questions. If there are any questions, very happy to have a look. If not, we can conclude, take a break, some refreshment, and return for Amal's talk at 12:30. Okay, maybe a good time to reflect and take some refreshment, and look forward to seeing everyone back at 12:30 for Amal's talk. Thank you very much indeed. Someone's thrown one question in there. What does it say? It's a question about the Buddha's teachings transcending the gods, and then wondering about his teachings in relation to the teaching of the Tao in Chinese tradition. In transcending the gods, I think the most important thing in relation to what we've been talking about, liberation and enlightenment, and remembering that liberation is liberation from cyclic existence, that turning through the six realms in the wheel of life ceaselessly. It's a recognition that although at first we may think, well, if it's possible life after life to achieve a better rebirth, a higher rebirth, and maybe the pinnacle of that expressed in the Bhavana Krama, the kind of pinnacle state, the highest kind of level of rebirth in the realm of the gods, where there is hardly any suffering, but there's still a realization that that is impermanent. Nothing lasts. When the causes and conditions for being there have become exhausted, there is only one way to go, and that's down. So the Buddha's insight was that the only path that makes any sense is liberation from the whole cycle. And that is, I think, what you inferred from what I was talking about in terms of the Buddha's teaching, transcending the gods. It's a recognition that cyclic existence, from the peak of its possibilities to its lowest, wherever we go, we are still circling in cyclic existence. And there is more or less, but at every level in that endless cycle, if we don't wake up, break the cycle, and achieve liberation from cyclic existence, then there's no possibility of an end to suffering and full enlightenment. So that's the way in which I think you're understanding me talking about the teaching of the Buddha transcending the gods. In relation to the teaching of the Tao, Taoism, there are some very interesting parallels. And I think it's too long to go into here, but if you really wanted to look fruitfully at it, then maybe it's good to look at the coming together, the coexistence of an exchange between Buddhists and Taoists, Buddhist thought and Taoist thought in the Tang dynasty in China. The exchange between the philosophies and spiritual paths during the Tang dynasty in China, which is probably, I might be wrong, but it's somewhere around the 6th to the 9th century, is really quite remarkable. And if you look there, you'll find many, many interesting things and very fruitful things, not just historically, but to think about in terms of one's own practice in looking at that wonderful, creative and fruitful exchange between Buddhism and Taoism in the Tang period in China. Okay. There's one other. Somebody's said, how can I avoid feeling overwhelmed by the task of becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all when I can't handle my own suffering at times? I think it's good to be very realistic, because when I was talking about bodhicitta and the development of bodhicitta, the possibility of realizing our full potential and becoming a Buddha, in motivating for that, we were beginning to say, well, I'm a human being and I have problems with my own suffering. I can't handle that a lot of the time. I have this wish, recognizing that other people are human beings just like me and are suffering in the same way, to do what I can to help them, but realistically recognize my limitations, recognize my limited capacity to help others. But that doesn't mean resigning on it altogether. It means starting from where I am and thinking, how can I better understand the first noble truth again, the truth of my own suffering and the suffering of others? And then to think, how is it possible to help not just myself, but others and all sentient beings? It's by realizing my full potential and to work it out step by step, slowly, moment by moment, day by day, from there, and trying not to see, oh, there's this overwhelming, almost unachievable idea of becoming a fully enlightened Buddha, and here's poor old me, suffering, incapable, inadequate, and juxtaposing those two rather extreme ideas, rather than thinking, yes, there is suffering. Yes, I do have problems with my own suffering. But so everybody else is suffering in the same way. And we all have some capacity, some potential, both to help ourselves and to help others. And to begin there and develop the motivation of bodhicitta. In bodhicitta has two aspects to it. The first is aspirational, the wish to do so, in order to motivate, to have sufficient motivation and energy to realize one's full positive potential, one needs a good motivation. And the motivation is generated by, if you like, hitching that to a vast vision, which generates a big aspiration. And then following that through, one begins to see it's possible and realistic, step by step, to see how to realize one's full potential. But if one starts from the point of view of it all being too far away and one being too incapable, that is so limiting that very little possibility comes out of that situation. But if you can think, however I am, wherever I am, there is the possibility, and by recognizing my own condition, realizing that I share that with all other sentient beings, and then develop a motivation born of an aspiration to liberate from cyclic existence, to recognize the nature of reality, cut the root of ignorance, and then realize one's full potential, not just for one's own cessation of suffering, but for the cessation of suffering of all sentient beings. I think that's the best answer I could offer to that one. Anyways, 12:06. So maybe it's time for tea. Thank you very much.